Hey, podcast listeners, thanks for listening. This is part 2 with Vinca LaFleur of West Wing Writers. She talks about Monroe's motivated sequence, mental cups. It all starts with ideas and content. Man, I thought it was great. Hope you love it. Enjoy.
Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Let's go.
Are there any tricks? I mean, I'm sure there's many tricks. I mean, the one trick that I often use when I'm doing a speech is I've often learned that you got to start it with one of three things, and that is a story, a fact, or a question. Mm-hmm. I typically lean towards the stories. And the reason I do that more than anything else, I think it connects, done right, it provides a connection to the audience. And most notably, it gets them off their phones for a minute. When somebody's telling a story, you know, they'll look up and they'll start paying attention. It's just profound when you're on stage and you can see that happening. And that gives me more comfort because then I know, all right, people are in this with me. And then I get more empowerment when I'm on stage and you know, I get some momentum myself. What other tricks do you see?
Well, I love what you just said there, you know, I think the most fundamental thing is when you're starting out a speech, you do have to get their attention. And you gave 3 great ways to do it. That's just, you know, that is the fundamental thing, right? You got to grab their attention. A story is one of the best ways to do it. And you gave some very good reasons why, both from the speaker's point of view, like, as you say, you know, you feel like you're getting people with you. I think people often, speakers, even speakers who don't always feel very comfortable, you know, at a podium or in front of a camera, are okay telling stories, whether it's a story about themselves or if they don't feel comfortable telling a story about themselves, a story about somebody else. These are things that we do naturally. And so it can be, you know, a great way for a speaker too, to kind of have that moment at the beginning of a speech where they harness their own adrenaline in a very positive way. And as you say, then, like, the audience is going to perk up and listen to a story because our minds are wired for stories. We like stories. It's how we make sense of the world. And a great thing about stories is that they're much easier to remember. And so when you tell somebody a story, odds are good that they'll be able to repeat the story after your speech is over. So that's another really good trick about that. Mm-hmm. So thinking then about, you know, other ways to grab an audience's attention right at the start of a speech. So you named 3: a story, a fact, or a question. You could give people sort of a shocking statistic or a controversial, like a counterintuitive statement. You could, some people will start with a joke, you know, people who are funny or are good at situational humor could kind of start with something funny if that works. You could start with, you know, and this is kind of like a question, but that when we think about a question, there are lots of different ways to frame a question. So it could be a rhetorical question. It could be a question to the audience that demands some of their participation. How many of you have, you know, try to get the audience kind of hooked with you right away? It could be... Another thing, when you said a fact, start with a fact. Sometimes, you know, the fact that you start with is something that's really sort of shocking or suspenseful, and that can also, you know, hook people right from the start. So those are all great ways to do it. And the main thing, which you just sort of understand intuitively, is you got to get their attention right from the start. Which is why we sometimes counsel our clients. You don't necessarily need to begin the speech with the customary paragraph of thank yous. That doesn't mean that you don't weave those thank yous and acknowledgments in at some point, but it doesn't need to be the first thing that comes out of your mouth. You don't want to waste that, you know, that first moment of engagement with an audience by thanking everybody for having you here tonight and so forth and so on. Jump right in and then put the thank yous a few paragraphs down.
Makes perfect sense. Now, here's the question. What do you stay away from, or what drives you crazy? I guess, what do you see as a speechwriter, as a professional communicator, do you look at and you go, oh, when you see this happen? Is there anything that just, and maybe it's repetitive, you see it over and over and it still drives you crazy?
So I have to say I have a lot of compassion for writers and speakers. So I'm not going to say that anything makes me groan or drives me crazy. I think it's really hard. And I really want to underscore that. You know, if it wasn't so hard, there would be no need for a company like mine. But it is, you know, but it is really hard. And I know that. And so the thing though that I think we all need to work on, and even professionals. I mean, this is something that I'm constantly, when I self-edit, things that I'm looking out for. So one is jargon. I think that every profession and every sector and every industry and every community falls into its own vernacular. And you just have to be on guard for that and make sure that you are not letting the jargon, first of all, obscure meaning. You said, Al, at the beginning that sometimes, you start to write things down and you realize, gosh, I don't really understand this. Well, I think sometimes it's so easy, we're making that PowerPoint slide and throwing up the terms that we always, use, and realize that we can't explain it. We don't really know what it means. Or, my example from before, we don't actually really know who the stakeholders are, so you have to really press yourself on the jargon and try to put the jargon into plain English. That's one thing. And then the other is kind of this question of concision and clarity and brevity. Now, in speeches especially, there actually is repetition oftentimes, because part of it is just, the experience of a speech. Sometimes it's a rhetorical device to be, repeating a phrase more than once. You think of "I have a dream" or any number of other speeches where that was actually part of the speech, to have the repeated line. So it's not that you should never have repetition. But what you don't want to have is repetition of ideas, so that people start to tune out because they feel like, okay, you've told me this already. Which reminds me that, sometimes people will say, well, the structure of a speech is tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. And I just really disagree with that. I think if you have done your job right, you shouldn't have to be, like, what a waste of your word count to say the same thing 3 times,
Yeah.
You should make the speech shorter and say it once really well. And then they'll remember it. So I think those are the 2 things I would put top of mind. Watch out for jargon, which includes acronyms and so forth. And then just, don't make it longer than it needs to be.
We got a lot of jargon, and sometimes it becomes our own language, and we got to watch out for that. So I think that's fantastic advice. Is this like crafting a song though, in some sense? I mean, do you know when you have a hit? Do you know it? And then you go, oh, this is really good. Or do you know when you're just not getting them? It's like, oh, this is, let's start with the first. Do you know when you have a hit?
I think it's fair to say I know when I think I have a hit. But but you never really know. When it's hard to explain. I do think sometimes there are definitely moments when I've worked with somebody and we're putting something together, and it does feel like the idea is so exciting, or the story is so perfect, or we found just the right analogy to bring it to life, or just the right example, or it's phrased in this perfect way, and you do feel really good about it. But you can't always know. And, and sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes you think you've written something brilliant. You've written a joke you think is hilarious, and the speaker doesn't like it, or the audience doesn't laugh. Sometimes these things happen. But I would say that yeah, I mean, I have, definitely felt at times like, wow, this is going to be good, but it's not, it's not because, and this is not false humility here, but it's not just simply like, oh, here's this brilliant piece of writing and now this is going to be a hit. It's got to be everything that's coming together. So you have a really important message that somebody is trying to deliver. It's an important moment for whatever reason. Sometimes you also get the symbolism of a great location or a great anniversary, or there's some reason why people are coming together that is also kind of adding to the momentousness of the occasion. And then you find the words. And when all of that comes together, then you have a hit.
How much of it is it delivery? I mean, I got to believe there's a huge part of delivery. And I also got to believe, you tell me, but there's some people you can write an okay speech for. Like, you never write okay, you always write fabulous speeches, I'm sure. But you write an okay speech for, and they can deliver it, and it's great. And there's also the opposite. You could write a fabulous speech. I mean, knockout, this is a hit. And then they can't deliver it right for whatever reason. They're just not meant to do it. How much is in that delivery, and how do you handle that?
So it is absolutely true that delivery is a great asset. If you can deliver something well, that's a great asset. And I think that it is easier to teach people to deliver speeches well than it is to teach people to write, so much less to think, right? Like, so it all starts with, did you have the good idea in the first place? Do you have the smart policy or the compelling product or the whatever else? It all starts with the message or the thing, the idea. The delivery is, great delivery is a great thing. But that's sort of the icing on the cake. And I think, we have to remember that if it's a speech, there's also a transcriptor, there's also a text. So it does live on its own too. And for the people in the room or the people who might watch the video, who are going to see the delivery is going to have a big impact. But at the end of the day, whether something goes down in history or not, whether or not it, actually moves product or not is going to depend on the content of the message, not the delivery. It's going to depend on the substance of the message and not the delivery. And so yeah, I mean, delivery is great. And I would encourage any speaker to practice because I really do believe delivery is the part that's easier to improve. The hard part is to have the great idea in the first place. And if you can do that, then please invest in delivery, practice it because it's going to make you so much better. And you've got this great idea, so sell it all the way.
I'm going to ask you a couple silly questions. Bear with me. I know that they're silly, but I'm still interested and I'm still going to ask them anyway. What do you think is the best speech of all time, in your opinion?
Oh gosh.
You got to give me one. I know there's a lot.
Yeah.
Can't you give me one that you like a lot? The GOAT.
Yes. Okay. So some speeches that just stick with me. Well, I'm always very impressed and deeply moved by Bobby Kennedy's speech in Indianapolis when he learned that Martin Luther King had been shot, and you can see video of that. And that speech is really, it just sticks with me for a number of reasons. I mean, obviously it is a terrible thing to have had to speak about, and a speech you wish had never had to have been given. But it is one of these instances where he kind of rises to the moment in this very impressive way. And he uses very simple language to talk about, this very big thing that has happened. And he is addressing a crowd in real time. He was campaigning and then he gets the news before the crowd does. And so he has to break it to the crowd in Indianapolis that this terrible thing has happened. And you hear the collective gasp from the crowd as he tells them. And then he talks about, again, just sort of really simple things, and love and hate and peace and violence and black and white and, truth and justice. And he talks about his own family's experience, that his brother lost his life to an assassin's gun. And then at the end, he quotes from memory a poem from Aeschylus, which is kind of incredible. I mean, it's just hard to imagine, in contemporary political life that, people would just be out there just like reciting classical poetry off the top of their head. But he comes up with this very apt verse, and when I was talking before about, Bill Clinton, that his intellectual and just personal interests were so wide ranging that kind of everything was credible. So here you have, Bobby Kennedy just kind of speaking from his own base of knowledge and quoting this poetry. And even if you had never heard of Aeschylus, that the words that he uses here still have meaning. You don't need to know where they came from to be moved by the words that Kennedy finds in that moment. So I just think it's just such an extraordinary, thing that he does. So that's one speech that sticks with me.
I got a question for you, and maybe it's obvious. I asked a lot of rhetorical questions. One of the reasons I asked you that is just to kind of get why you felt like those speeches were terrific, and that's what you've done. What about the Gettysburg speech everybody talks about? Is that just a circumstantial situation that made it so great? I mean, it had some some incredible words in it. But what's your view on that? Was it great, or was it like, yeah, it's just part of history?
Yeah, well, I don't want to pretend to be a scholar of Lincoln or of the Gettysburg Address, but I mean, just again, when we think about some of the things, so we have this incredible moment in history. We have the leader, we have the location, we have the meaning. It was one of those moments where all of those things were being fused together, like we've said, sort of this all of the things coming together at once. And then in 272 words, he managed to say something really profound, didn't use more words than were necessary. But, said something so profound that we're still talking about it today in 2023, with quotable lines, with a vision that touched people, just really speaking to the moment. And then the other thing that I will say about that speech is that it follows a structure which we as speechwriters often refer to, that's called Monroe's motivated sequence. And Monroe's motivated sequence has 5 steps in it. The first one is to get the audience's attention. The second one is to define a problem or a need. The third is to present a solution to the problem or need that you've just identified. The fourth is a vision of how things will be different if you do or don't adopt the solution that's being put forth. And the last is a call to action. And if you look at those 272 words, you will see all 5 of those steps of Monroe in there. And I think that's also one of the reasons why the speech just coheres so well, and why we're still talking about it, why we remember it, why we're able to kind of remember it and
right.
talk about it even now.
Well, what's amazing to me is what you said. It's like 271 or 272 words. I mean, a really small speech that gets all those points across. And that I guess embodies your position on simplicity and the fact that it can be done in powerful fashion. Very nice. I could go on forever. This is awesome, by the way. This is very awesome. You're good at what you do. Thank you for this. What's your view on ChatGPT?
I have played with it a little bit myself, but not too much yet. I mean, it's extraordinary. Of course, it's extraordinary. There are a lot of things about ChatGPT that seem incredibly exciting to me, and also some that make me very nervous. And I'm sure that you are much better versed in these things than I am. But some of the things that make me nervous are, AI's propensity to fabricate and hallucinate and all of that. The fact that because it seems so convincing, because it is so self-assured, the way that ChatGPT kind of speaks, that it could lead impressionable people, to think things that aren't true, maybe to follow advice that isn't sound. I worry about that. I have read articles about, the influence that ChatGPT could have even on our political system. If it makes it so easy to generate text that you could then, be bombarding politicians with letters or things that could sway decision making. So I have a whole mixed bag of concerns about it. And the last one that I have is that it's my understanding that at least right now, the sort of the corpus of data that it's using to generate the responses is only current up through 2021 or something like that. So it's also, it's not even drawing on the most recent information, and that makes me nervous too. But having said all of that, I mean, wow. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. And I'm sure that it will be transformative, but like every transformative technology, I'm sure there are going to be unintended consequences.
As always. No, I think it's great technology. Look, my point of view is very cool. I think, I use it, and it's a good place to get started, just to get started. But you're absolutely right. It's filtering, or I don't want to say it's not filtering. It's grabbing anything and everything from the internet with unknown copyrights. It's unbounded. You're going to get everything from self-help to hate speech, all in the same gamut. So you got to be very careful. IBM's approach is we're much more bounded. We're business driven. We make sure it's isolated to one domain. But ChatGPT is a large language model that I think could still be used. What I'm worried about is, I don't know if you've heard these fake speeches. Like there's a fake Biden speech out there. That's a very hot trend in AI voice tech. It's his voice. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
if right now, I think it's all in entertainment and people aren't having good, positive fun with it, at least so far I've seen. But all it would take is for somebody to do that, put it in the context of some kind of threat to another country or something.
Right. Right. No,
That's
terrifying.
very scary. It's very scary. I mean, yeah, I don't know what we're going to do. So moving on from that. All right, I got your chat GPT. You talk about mental cups. Can you tell us a little bit
Hmm.
more about mental cups? I've heard
Yeah.
you speak
So,
about mental cups.
yeah, so this is when I'm talking about just sort of thinking about how much information you can give an audience at one time. And when you're thinking about a presentation or a message that you're trying to impart, to be mindful of, an audience that's hearing something in real time that does not have the text in front of them, can't flip back and reread the paragraph that you just said that they didn't quite get the first time. You just have to be very intentional about how much information you present, what order you present it in, what you're going to emphasize, and so on. Because, and I use the analogy of just sort of, the brain like a cup. There is just only so much that it can hold in one go. And I would say sort of 20 minutes worth is probably the max of what people can really contain in one go. And if you give them more than that, if you imagine like pouring water into a cup, that once it has reached the rim, you can keep pouring the water, and the cup is going to stay full, but things are now going to be splashing out onto the table, and you end up with a mess instead of a message, because you can no longer contain what you can no longer control what stayed in the cup and what splashed out onto the table. And so that's really what I mean. And I'm always, I joke, when I'm teaching workshops, which are typically not 20 minutes long, they're an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
that it may seem that I'm contravening my own advice there. But what I try to do in a workshop is to break it up so that I'm not just talking, for that whole time, but that I'm breaking it up with exercises or audience discussion or showing a video clip or something else to kind of chunk the information so that people's minds just have time to process a little bit and to sort and to, reset, refresh, and get ready to absorb the next cupful of content.
How do you
So
find
that's
that
really,
balance though? I mean,
yeah.
that's the difficulty. I mean, because I hear exactly what you're saying, but a lot of people, as I'm coaching them, and look, I need to be coached just as well, make no mistake. But as I'm coaching them, they don't see it quite the way I see it, right? They say, "Oh,
Hmm.
this is not too much. We'll be fine here." All these words
Yeah.
on the slide, they need those. That kind. How do you know if you found the right balance? Is there any tests that you can make, or any things you can check yourself on?
Yeah, I mean there are some sort of simple ones, post event surveys. But if you do, you give a presentation and then even immediately afterward, give the audience a brief survey and ask them, a few questions about the material you just presented and what do they remember and what do they retain. And one exercise I like to do sometimes in workshops, I had found a 3-minute speech. It was a TED talk that somebody gave, and it's only 3 minutes long. And I would show this 3-minute clip, and one of the things that the presenter does in this 3-minute speech is he's basically giving how do you become successful in life. And he says he went and he interviewed a lot of people who go to conferences like TED, successful people, ask them what their secrets are for how they thrive in life. And then he has these 8 things that people do. So in the span of 3 minutes, he lists 8 things that make people successful. I show people this 3-minute clip, and then I ask them how many of the 8 things they can remember. And it's usually nobody can remember all 8, even after a 3-minute clip that we just watched. But then what's interesting is I say, well, what do you remember? And they remember a few key things. They remember the part where he told the story. They remember the funny line, the joke that made them all laugh out loud. They remember that. They remember the acronym. He says at one point that, in order to be successful, you have to deal with a lot of crap. And what does crap stand for? And I think it's like criticism, rejection, a-holes, and pressure, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. They all remember that, right? Like, again, like using what's the word? Mnemonic device, to remember something. So he's using in these 3 minutes, little rhetorical tricks that help some of his 8 points stick, whereas the other ones, even 3 minutes is too long to retain a list that has 8 things in it. So I think the way, coming back to your question about, when you're coaching people, I think you have to actually sort of put it to the test with them and have them experiment, have somebody present a list of 10 facts and then have somebody else weave those 10 facts into a story and kind of see which ways the audience is, or somebody else puts them up on a slide and, leaves the slide up for 4 minutes. See what are the different ways that you can help an audience retain the information, if that's really what you're trying to achieve.
And when you do these speeches, do you put emphasis on where tone should be placed? I mean, where does tone come in? Tone, inflection, etc.
Yeah. So, well, I guess that sort of comes down to delivery. When we're working with speakers to really coach their delivery, sometimes we'll, literally work with them to mark up the speech text, almost like sheet music, underscoring things, putting things in bold, putting a lot of ellipses, sometimes writing into the speech text, I'll write in parentheses, pause, to sort of give them stage directions or whatever to help them kind of deliver their own material. And tone and what I would call vocal variety does matter a lot when you're speaking, because that's what makes it interesting to the listener's ear to have the variety. We've all, remember the old Charlie Brown cartoons where the teacher's voice was wah, wah, wah. When something just sounds so monotone, it's hard to stay engaged. So vocal variety does matter a lot. Getting a little bit louder, getting a little bit quieter, the pitch, the tone, all of those things can make a big difference. So yes, it does matter. But, but at the end of the day, like I said before, it does all start with the ideas. It does all start with the content, what you're saying, and making sure that what it looks like on the page, that what you're about to say is really worth listening to. And then you can practice the tone and delivery.
Thank you very much for that. Before we leave, West Wing Writers, I presume it's a combination of, well, you need to describe your company, but it will do education training on communication writing as well as writing speeches themselves. I mean, tell me what offerings you guys have.
Yeah, so we're a strategic communications firm and really kind of see ourselves in the business of, some of our own kind of taglines say we're helping good people get good ideas out into the world. We are actually platform agnostic about what the best way is to get that idea out. So it might be through a speech. It might be through their website. It might be through a white paper. It might be a video script. It might be they're having a multi-speaker conference. It might be internal comms or external comms. It might be ad copy. As short as a tweet, as long as a book. They're all different ways to be getting a good idea out into the world. But our role is actually kind of all along the continuum of first helping people develop that idea to really understand what is the unique thing, the special thing, the important thing that they have to say that is really unique to them, the message that they need to get out there that's going to differentiate them from others in their space. So to develop that message, identify and develop that message, and then to actually craft that message. So the execution part, the writing, to express the idea. So we develop the idea, express the idea again in whatever form makes sense. And then the last phase of that is to amplify the idea. And that's a part of the business that we don't talk about as much. It's not as obvious in our name, West Wing Writers. The fact that we write is pretty obvious, but the amplification piece is both, the training, the way I met you, sort of doing things like workshops and educational offerings for communicators in-house and otherwise. And then also we have a publishing imprint called Disruption Books that is part of our firm. So yeah, we're very proud of the business. We're now more than 2 decades old, as I said, founded in 2001 and headquartered in DC, but with also a physical office in New York, a big presence in Northern California, and really our clients are mostly in the U.S., but some abroad as well, and certainly some global, organizations that have locations all over the world.
Very nice. Where can folks reach you and West Wing Writers?
So our website is westwingwriters.com, and that's probably the best place to go. We also have a very active Twitter, which is at West Wing Writers, and that is the place to just sort of follow us day to day. And, I'm going to say too, that one of the things that we're really proud about at the firm is that we have helped launch a lot of careers over the course of our existence. We have a very robust internship program of which we're extremely proud. And we take 4 interns a cycle. We have 3 cycles a year, so about 12 interns coming through the firm every year. We routinely get as many as 500 applications for one of these cycles. So for 4 slots, it's a very competitive internship. But I think that's because our former interns go on to do incredible things, including writing for CEOs and political leaders and us. If you look at our own masthead, many of the people on our staff right now began as interns at the company and stayed and rose within the company.
Who are the client profiles you're targeting? There may be some people that are looking for coaching. I don't know if you do that. Well, I'll just stop there.
Yeah.
What's your client profile?
So our client profile is it is senior leaders who want to be thought leaders, or who again have important messages that they need to communicate internally, sometimes, or externally, or both. And I would say that our client mix. It's in private sector organizations, from some of the biggest firms out there, the best known brand names in the world, to small startups and others. Then we also do a lot of work for foundations and nonprofits and academic institutions and so on. Great. And some political work as well, and then work for high profile individuals. They're public figures who may have come out of one or another of these sectors, or from entertainment or sports, who now, they have a platform and causes they believe in, and we work with individuals as well.
Would you like to say a few words about Chief?
So Chief is actually, so I'm a founding member of the DC chapter of Chief. I'm not a founding member of the entire organization. So I'm actually a relatively new member of Chief overall, but I was a founding member of their DC branch. This is an organization, it began in New York, and it is, just as you were saying, it's for women leaders, kind of C-suite women leaders, to network and to support each other and to boost our own kind of professional development and so on. And I have just found it to be a great resource to meet other women in jobs like mine, and to share ideas and to network. So I think it's a great resource, for women who are looking for that sort of thing.
All right, I got 3 very simple questions, as we'll wrap it up with this. A little personal, but I think you'll be fine with them. Who inspires you?
Who inspires me? Oh, so many people inspire me. But I'm just going to go with the first thing that just started, that just immediately, instinctively. My parents inspire me. I do feel just really fortunate to have been raised by 2 amazing parents. As I say, they were both professors. They're retired now, but both still, even though they're in their 80s, both still extremely active. And in fact, they just published a book that they wrote together just last year. So, my parents, both brilliant writers, and thinkers and role models. So they inspire me. My mom, whose name is Elaine Showalter, for a long time was the chairman of the English department at Princeton, but also known as a leading feminist scholar, really at the vanguard of feminist literary studies. My father, whose name is English Showalter, was a French professor and a scholar of 18th century French. And so when I talk about, I had wanted to be a diplomat and I was a French major in college. I mean, I think I'm really the fusion of both of my parents.
I was going to say, they must love you. They're like, this is the perfect kid.
Well, of course they love me, but I love them. And so that's who immediately came to mind. I of course, literally, I wouldn't be here without them, but also I'm just, I'm
fair enough.
I still learn from them today.
All right. Question number 2, and you're a writer, so I'm really interested in this. What's the book you recommend most?
Well, I'm here. I'm going to give an answer, just thinking about my profession. If I had to tell somebody to read just kind of one book that would be the most useful for the kind of work I do, I would say read Made to Stick, which is by Chip and Dan Heath. And it is super accessible. and it has just really good practical tips. And the book itself is actually sort of at a meta level, like the book itself illustrates and manifests a lot of the lessons that the book is encouraging people, to bring to their own work. So Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath, if you want to be an effective communicator.
Awesome. Last one. This is the easiest one of all. What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing for fun right now, because I actually just came back from one of these. My husband and I, late in life, are learning how to sail
Nice.
a boat. And yeah, so this does not come naturally to me, I must tell you. I grew up in central New Jersey, and I'm not a seafaring kind of gal, but I'm trying, and it's a whole new vocabulary. I'm learning all kinds of new words like starboard port and all of this, and halyard and
yes,
rudder, and there's a whole new thing to learn, but it's kind of fun, and being on the water is of course amazing, and the dream is that we would someday become good enough sailors that we could invite friends to trust us to take them out.
That's funny.
No Gilligan's Island, but that we could all go sailing together. So that's the plan.
Well,
that's what I'm doing.
It's funny that you say that. I bought a boat like about a month ago, and last week we took it out. But it's a surf boat. You can actually surf on the back of it. So before I take friends out last week, and it's I live in Kansas City, so it's in southern Missouri and the lake, and so we went down. There's a little chilly, but it wasn't bad. So we take it out, and I'm messing around with this thing, and it's got tabs, so it can level the boat. Like if it's tilted a little bit, you just hit this tab. That's what they were telling me to do. So we're out this pleasure ride, and I'm going. So I started playing with the tabs. This is the impatience in me. I didn't think they were responding. Like I'd put the tab up to like a number 5, and then it would go back down to 0. But what I found out later, what it was doing is it would calibrate down to 0 until it worked its way up to 5, right? So I don't think it works. So then I'm like, all right, hit it again. Go to 10. Hit it again to go to 20. And I'm like, this thing isn't working. All of a sudden, the boat goes boom on its side. And I am going down the main channel, and I got kicked out of my seat. And my wife was on the other seat. I'm almost sitting on her. She's looking at me. I'm looking at her. I'm like, I'm not even holding the steering wheel anymore. I had to make my way back and finally pulled the throttle back, and I got to admit, I was scared to death for a minute. I thought we were going to tumble over. So practice before. I'm glad I did that without my friends being on board. Thank you for spending so much time with us. I learned a ton. This is going to be great. You're special because we're going to have 2 podcasts out of this.
Oh my goodness.
This is fantastic.
Wow.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for taking so much time, and hopefully you get a lot of traffic to your site. So again, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
It was a huge honor and a delight to see you both again. All right. Take care.
Thank you. And as always, hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you on the podcast. Later, guys.